So therapy's not working for your teenager. Would medication help? Well, let's talk about that today on Tips on Teens. My name is Kent Toussaint. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in helping kids, teens, and families live happier lives. I lead two organizations, the group Private Practice Teen Therapy Center and the nonprofit 501c3 organization Child and Teen Counseling, both here in Woodland Hills, California. And every Wednesday at noon, I jump onto Facebook Live to answer your parenting questions. Let's jump into today's. My 16-year-old daughter has some issues. She's really unmotivated, on her phone all the time, and sleeps a lot. For a while, I just thought she was a typical lazy teenager. But about a year ago, my husband and I realized she might be suffering from depression. She doesn't seem to have one particular thing that bothers her, so it's hard to tell. We tried therapy, but she wasn't into it, and eventually we stopped. What I'm wondering is this: how do I tell if her problem is something that needs medication? Should I take her to a psychiatrist? How do I get this diagnosed? Thank you for your question. It's a great question, and I want to touch many points on this. First is the medical standpoint. First of all, I want to remind everyone that I'm a licensed marriage family therapist and not a medical doctor. So if you want to have a world clear medical opinion whether your kids needs medication, you probably need to talk to a psychiatrist, and I strongly recommend that psychiatrist is someone who focuses on kids, teens, and families, teenagers especially, because the adolescent brain is different than an adult brain. So you can take your child to an adolescent psychiatrist, and they can evaluate and then prescribe accordingly. Now, I know some of you are like, wait a minute, I don't really want to put my kid on psychotropic medication. That scares me. What about the side effects? Those are legitimate questions and appropriate to ask your psychiatrist those questions. They should be able to alleviate those fears with how they respond. And if they're not alleviating those fears, then you get a second opinion or you try something else. When I think about referring to a psychiatrist is if therapy is really not working, if there are, things like self-harm, suicidality, maybe, if it's extreme where your kid is kind of losing touch with reality and having delusions. Those are just a few examples of many that you would want to consider. But it's a tough decision. You can also, if you want to get diagnosed, really specifically diagnosed, you can go to a clinical psychologist or a neuropsychologist who focuses on teenagers and have them go through a battery of tests, which is, they fill out surveys, answer questions, there's interviews. It probably takes a couple weeks to go through all the tests, and they come up with a full report. And they say, this is our exact diagnosis of what we think it is from what these test results are. You give that to the psychiatrist, and now that psychiatrist has a lot more information to go on to prescribe. So again, there's a lot of moving pieces here. A lot of it costs money, unfortunately. Finding a child psychiatrist or a child psychiatrist or psychologist who's on an insurance panel is kind of a unicorn. I'm not saying they're not out there, but they are hard to find and hard to find with availability. There are people who are in private practice, cash pay, who are doing this, but again, it does cost more money. You can also try to go through your school system and get the school to test. But again, it's a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of paperwork, and it's a lot of proving the need. If your child or your teenager is not willing to do therapy, and I understand that, it could be if that one therapist was not a good fit. Again, finding a therapist who really understands teens, understands teenage resistance to therapy and knows how to work through that, I think is important. If your child is in real danger, again, they're cutting, they're using a lot of drugs, they're possibly suicidal or something like that, you may want to consider a residential program to put them into, which is basically they're in for, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 90 days, whatever that is, to help get them on the right track where they're focused, they're away from drugs and alcohol, they're in group therapy every day, individual therapy every day, to kind of get them in a stable place, find the right medication to help get them stable. So there's a lot of different aspects to this. Again, I encourage you to look into therapy, even if you get the medication, because medication is often there to help create a more stable balance for your kids so they can do the work. So eventually, with with the guidance of the psychiatrist, can eventually wean off that medication, hopefully. That would be the goal. Again, there's a lot of moving factors, moving pieces in this. It's important to get help. My concern is if you don't do anything, it just continues to get worse, and we don't want that. So again, reach out, get help, talk to your therapist, get a psychiatrist referral from your pediatrician or your therapist. If you want to get testing, find a psychologist who can do that. But again, some of this stuff does cost money, unfortunately. Right now, almost every child psychologist or psychiatrist I know is booked out for the next 3 months. There are some exceptions, but child psychiatry is booming right now. Because there's a lot of people in need, especially with COVID. It's really knocked a lot of kids down. Anyways, that's our question for today. If you'd like your question answered here on Tips on Teens, you can email us at tipsonteens@teentherapycenter.com or direct message us right here on Facebook. We love your questions. Keep them coming. I'll be here next Wednesday. Again, my name is Kent Toussaint. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist from Teen Therapy Center and Child and Teen Counseling. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.